Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Professor Rich, and today we're looking at the sub-skills of reading. So let's start with a little fun true or false quiz. All right, so look at the sentences, true or false. All of these statements relate to the skill of reading. Look at the statements. Do you think they are true or false? And while you do that, I'll say hello to our learners in the chat. Hello to Mina Pandi. Hello to Sanjan. Hello, Alexander. And Alexander says he wants to read more because his word capacity is not enough. And I think by word capacity, Alexander's talking about his lexicon or his vocabulary. Pallavi said, I didn't understand your question. So this was a question in the poll just before we went live. And the question is, do you wish you would read more? Which means, do you wish you had the time, opportunity, and or effort to read more books? And if so, why? If not, why not? I would also like to say hello to Daisy and Julia Hata. Hello. Hello also to Pallavi. Good to see you. Long time no see. Is it Pallavi? When did I see you last? A week and a bit? Hello to Manuel Gordillo, instigator of fiery conversations on our wonderful English learning chat server. So, true or false? Number one, reading is one of two receptive skills in language. Number two, reading is made up of 4 sub-skills. Number 3, one activity can consist in several sub-skills. We have a variety of answers so far. Alexander thinks true, true, true. Julia thinks true, true, true. Manuel thinks the second one is false. And here's Anawat. Hello, Anawat. How are you doing? Hello to anyone watching this video. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that you can get notifications about our future classes. We do 2 live English classes a week on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. UK time. You can find those times if you go to the channel and go to the upcoming streams. So let's have a look at the answers for this. Number 1 is true. So we traditionally consider that languages have 2 receptive skills. They are reading and listening. However, some people like Diane Freeman have suggested extra skills such as grammaring. That is the skill of grammatically constructing a correct utterance or sentence. Number 2, which was reading is made up of 4 sub-skills. Manuel, you got it. This is false. So the exact number of sub-skills is not agreed upon. Sub-skills are loosely defined. And today, we're going to look at a lot of sub-skills. You may have heard of traditional sub-skills such as skimming, scanning, and reading for detail. These are the common reading sub-skills: skimming, scanning, reading for detail. But we're going to take a look a bit deeper at some other sub-skills of reading. Finally, we had number 3. Number 3 is one activity can consist in several sub-skills, and that is true. For example, reading fluency involves both skimming and scanning and other sub-skills. So one activity can indeed consist in several sub-skills. In fact, the sub-skills themselves can overlap, and we're going to see this where you have a sub-skill and then another sub-skill, and there's some overlap between those skills because, as I said, these skills are not loosely defined. If you're learning to be a boxer, then being a boxer means punching and dodging. But actually, punching and dodging both have an overlap. You need to twist your body in certain ways, and these skills actually complement each other. So if you learn to become good at punching, you also become better at dodging. And that's the same idea with language sub-skills. So the skills have some overlap. Let's have a look at the plan for today. So, the plan for today. We have done our true or false about reading skills. So, I'm going to break down and examine the sub-skills of reading. And you can see a list there of the sub-skills of reading that I'm going to talk about. This class is going to be a 2-part class, and this is part 1. So, in part 1, we're going to talk about half of these sub-skills of reading. And then we'll have a lot of time for questions at the end if you have any questions about this particular area. So, let's move on. I'm going to give you a little task here. So, I'm going to show you a text. I will only show you the text for 5 seconds. 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Gone. So you will see a text for 5 seconds. Afterwards, I'll ask you some questions. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Hello, Elena Nisimova. I don't know why I did Italian there. But hello, Elena. It's nice to see you. Julia's ready. Mina is ready. Emmanuel says, come on, what are you doing? I've always been ready. I'm Manuel. All right. You will only get to see this text for 5 seconds, remember? 5 seconds. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Right. What type of text was it? What's the topic? And where would you see that text? So, what type of text was it? What was the topic? And where would you see that type of text? If you took a screenshot, you're not doing the activity properly, Pallavi, and you will get 10 years of detention. So we've got a number of answers in the chat there, really good. Manuel says how the stock market works. Alexander says it looks like a newspaper text or learning book for business economy. Julia says the topic is price inflation. Daisy says stock market, economic news, business news. Very good. Okay, well done, everybody. We got some great answers there. So it's interesting that, isn't it? I showed you this. Here it is. I showed you this text for 5 seconds, and you had a good idea of really the kind of general feeling of what this was, even to the point where Alexander says it's from a newspaper. And it is. It is from a newspaper. So you know where it's from and you know what it's about after 5 seconds. So my question then is, what skill did we just practice? What sub-skill did we just practice? You can type your answer in the chat. And this is an indication that most people don't know the difference between skimming and scanning. So the sub-skill we just practiced is skimming. Skimming. So literally in English, skimming means you just take the top. You just go along the top, right? That's skimming. So skimming is you look at something quite quickly and you get a very shallow idea of the whole thing. A very shallow, a very simple or very basic idea of the whole thing. That's the idea of skimming. So we're going to practice this again. I'm going to show you a new text. And remember the questions? The questions are the same. So the questions are, what's the topic? Where would you see this? And what type of text is it? Is it an email? Is it an article? Is it a blog? Is it a YouTube comment? Okay? 3, 2, 1. All right. So what type of text was that? What was the topic? And where would you see that text? Pallavi says, how would I know where it's from? Well, Pallavi, that's one of the sub-skills that overlaps with skimming. So we have skimming, and a sub-skill that overlaps with skimming is inference. And we're going to practice inference a little bit later on. But the idea there is that you can infer where the text is from. By looking at the style of text, the way it's written, and the topic, you can infer where it's from. You can infer whether it's a message, whether it's an email, or whether it's a newspaper article. So we're going to look at inference a little bit later. So we have a few answers in the chat for the topic. Electric cars versus conventional, says Alexander. Mina says electric cars versus petrol ones. Science articles, says Maria del Carmen. Okay, let's go back. Let's have a look. So I think electric cars versus petrol cars is fair as an overall title, but I would say more specifically that this is an article about the sort of sadness of losing electric cars. And if you look at it closely, you'll see that. This is really an article that is bemoaning the loss of electric cars. It's an article which is expressing an opinion that they're sad that petrol cars are going. Look at this. Cars will become like tools for going places and less like friends that we care about. We will lose the heart and excitement of old cars. It's like saying goodbye to a part of car history. So we can see actually this is opinionated. Where do you think you would see an article like this? Where do you think you would see an article like this? A magazine like Economist? Not bad. On the internet? Yes, I think so. Where specifically on the internet do you think? So I was thinking something like a motorist website or Top Gear magazine or something like that. I think this would be on sort of a website which is for car fans, you know, people who really like cars. Yeah, exactly. Alexander has it. So a car fan site. That's what I think. Okay, everybody, we're going to do one more of these, except my face has disappeared. Donk. There we are. We're going to do one more of these, so get ready to practice your skimming sub-skill one more time. This one's going to be super fast. Are you ready for this? Okay, let's go. That's it. That's what you're getting. Okay. So what about that? Daily routine. Interesting. A novel. Alexander. Wow. Bingo. Look at that. Daisy's got it. She's clever. There used to be a Top Gear magazine. I don't know if there still is. Car collection, indeed. An article about lifestyle. No, Daisy has it. Yeah, it's Cinderella. Well done. Nice bit of skimming there, Daisy. So you can see here in detail, you can see that it's Cinderella, stepmother, stepsisters, unkind, dressed in old, worn-out clothes, fancy parties, etc. So Pallavi says this is very difficult. So Pallavi, this is an indication that you need to practice your skimming skill. That means that you pick up things to read and just very quickly look at the article and try to get an idea of what the article is about. All right, so that's the skill of skimming. We've already talked about that. The skill we just practiced was skimming. Bonk. So let's move on then. And now we'll do scanning. I think it's good to do scanning after skimming because people always get them confused. Maybe we should change the name of one of these. Let's have a look at scanning. So, in the chat, can you try to guess the missing words here? The missing words to define this sub-skill. What is the skill of scanning when it comes to reading? So there's some pretty good answers in the chat already. Well done, everybody. Some people clearly do know what this means. Scanning is the skill of searching a text in order to find parts of the text where something is mentioned. I'll say that again. Scanning is the skill of searching a text in order to find the parts of the text where something is mentioned. So this means that you have some information that you want to find, and you're going to then look through the text quickly to find the part of the text where that thing is mentioned. That is scanning. So you might associate scanning with putting your finger on the page and going, right? That's the scanning motion. You get a document and you go, right? Oh, it's here somewhere. Where is it? It's, there, right? That's scanning. It's searching a text for the relevant information. All right? And I do believe that I have a little bit of practice for this as well. So, I'm going to show you some sentences relating to the text from before, the text about petrol engine cars. First of all, I want you to just have a think about what the answers might be, and then I'll show you the text and you can try to find them. Some people might already know the answers. Car lovers enjoy petrol cars for their bottom and their meow. Electric cars don't have. Cars are moving away from being like moo. The change is similar to saying bah. So, what do you think the missing words are? Shall we have a quick look? Okay, let's have a look at the article. Here's the article. So we're looking for car lovers enjoy their petrol cars for 2 reasons. What reasons? Electric cars don't have what? What don't they have? Cars are moving away from being like what thing? And the change is similar to saying what? Oh, I'm sorry, Pallavi. All right, well, have a lovely day and do try and catch this later. It's good to see you always. And I hope everything's okay with you. And 5 seconds. All right. So the answers. Car lovers enjoy petrol cars for their sound and smell. Electric cars don't have gears. Cars are moving away from being like friends. And the change is similar to saying goodbye. So car lovers enjoy petrol cars for their sound and smell. Electric cars don't have gears. Cars are moving away from being like friends, and the change is similar to saying goodbye. What are gears? So gears are something you have on a bike or a car normally, and they're basically a mechanical cog that you change with a pedal in order to change the power output of the engine. And actually, I think it would be much better for me to just show you a picture of some gears, and then that will make perfect sense. So there you go. Oh. These are gears. So in a car, you have to change gear if you have a manual car. In the UK, most cars are manual cars, but that is changing now, unfortunately. I quite like manual cars, but these days people prefer automatics. That's true. Cars with a manual gear, Alexander. So in the UK, cars with a manual gear used to be the only car you could get. And in fact, the most cars. Electric cars don't have pedals. My word. Scary. I don't want one. I want a big diesel engine. A big, massive 12-litre diesel engine in a tank. Can I have that, please? Please. Let me have a tank. 500-ton tank with a 12-litre diesel engine. Come on. I don't want a Microlite electric car. That sucks. Okay, let's move on to... Oh, we've done that. Let's move on to our next skill. So we're going to move on. We're going to talk about decoding. Decoding. So this also is a sub-skill of reading, and decoding is about sound, spelling, relationships. So let's have a look at some sound spelling relationships. Sound spelling relationships are very difficult in English. It's one of the most difficult things for learners of English, that the sound spelling relationships are very complicated. Very complicated. Not like Spanish, where the sound spelling relationships are very simple. In English, the sound spelling relationships are very complicated. So let's have a look at some graphemes. Everybody say this. Grapheme. A grapheme. Oh, I do love a grapheme for breakfast, dear. Have you ever had a nice cup of grapheme? No, you can't have a cup of grapheme, but graphemes. We're talking about graphemes. A grapheme is a small group of letters which has some meaning in a word. So, for example, pro is a grapheme and nounce is a grapheme. Actually, ounce is a grapheme as well. So graphemes are the small units that construct words, and we want to know, how do you pronounce these different graphemes? So let's have a look here. We got 1 to 7, and here you can see some graphemes. We might also call these suffixes. At the top and at the bottom, we could call those prefixes. So we got 5 suffixes and 2 prefixes, in general also called graphemes. Graphemes. Yeah, I want a tank, Daisy. I want a tank. Do you think I can buy a tank in Vietnam if I have enough money? How much money do you need in Vietnam to buy a tank? I don't need a house. I'm not going to live in a house. I'm going to live in a tank. Do Vietnamese have tanks? Does the Vietnamese army use tanks? I want to buy one. Abrams. Oh, that sounds a bit... Abrams tank. That sounds a bit American. Sounds a bit United States. No, I'm not so keen on that, mate. I'm more about, what's it called? The Challenger. Yeah. The Challenger tank. That's a rubbish name though, isn't it? Challenger. I'll tell you what, you can say what you want about the Nazis in World War II, but they had bloody good names for their tanks. They did have good names for their tanks. Panzer. See, that's a name for a tank, isn't it? Panzer. Panzer. And they had one called the Tiger tank? Am I right in saying that? Tiger tank? They were so big they couldn't go over the bridge. How do you pronounce these graphemes, folks? Oh, great work there from Maria del Carmen. Well done. By the way, everybody, thank you so much for joining our little reading practice stream here today. Please do smash that like button. And if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to the channel, then push that button now to subscribe. We do these live streams twice a week normally, and I try to cover high quality, interesting language learning topics which are not being covered by other channels. We have a lovely community that you can join, and you can get access to that community on bit.ly/englearnchat. If you look below the video, you will find the link for that, and also you can see that now in the chat. I'll give you another 10 seconds. 10 seconds to try and get the pronunciation of these graphemes. Daisy says, Rich, I can finally see the slogan on your shirt. Go on, I'll stand up. It's Halloween, folks. And this is my contribution. Now I'm disappearing, so I'm going to sit down again. All right, everybody. So let's move on. Let me show you some answers to this. Right, we'll start off with ed, ing, and tion. So that's ud, ing, and shun. And here they are. Here's the pronunciation of those things. So we've got d, t, and id for ed at the end. Played, walked, added. Very good. Then at the end, ing. That's normally ing, but actually, there's another option now, folks. Do you know this? You can also say that. Now, if you want to sound fancy, then this is better. But if you're talking to people in the street, you will hear a lot of people use this. So that's ing and in. So we've got running and running. Singing, singing, singing. A lot of people use this now, this second one. It's very popular. Very popular. I went running and then I did a bit of singing. Running instead of running. Running. And then for this one we have shun. Shun. Nation. Action. Action. Shun. Just, it's a weak sound, not a strong sound. So not shon, no. Action, no. Shun, action, action, nation, action. Okay, moving along here to number 4. And this is one of the most difficult graphemes in English, because it has so many different pronunciations. So if you look here, you can see that it has uff, o, uff, oo, ow, o, and or. So here's examples. Rough, though, cough, through, plough, borough. Excuse me. Let me just check that one. Yeah, that one's wrong. That's not an O sound. Can we have an O with this? Throw, though, 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 though. We've got though there. Yeah, that's that one. Bong. Get rid of that. And get rid of that. Oh, actually, that means borough. It means that is an option. Borough. Yeah. Correct pronunciation there, borough. 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 So that's like that. And then we got thought. So once again, rough, though, cough, through, plough, borough, and thought. Yeah, it's great English, isn't it? What do you think? You want to learn this language, folks? So yeah, this is the most complicated of all the graphemes in terms of decoding. What's decoding? Answers in the chat. Tell me now. What is decoding? What is decoding, everybody? Manuel, in our culture, Halloween is not really about death. It's about fun and kind of scaring people in a fun way. It's not a celebration of death. It's not like Dia de los Muertos or whatever it's called in Mexico. It's not like that. It's different. Yeah, so Daisy, that is a really interesting question. Do Westerners have any rules when it comes to pronouncing graphemes when seeing strange words? The answer is yes, and these are the rules. However, as you can see, we have some problems. Like if I have a word, a new word in the language that uses this, how do I know how to say it? And this leads to some interesting situations where new words in, for example, science might come into the language and you get people saying them in lots of different ways. But yes, natives do have rules for it, and these are the rules. So the rules are decoding. It's the decoding skill. As Maria del Carmen just said, sound plus spelling relationships. So sound plus spelling relationships, they are the rules. I meant, how do you know which grapheme to say? Oh, you mean when hearing a word? Wait, what do you mean? Can you can you clarify? So Vitale says, you learn that by osmosis, don't you? First of all, Vitali, I love that expression, learn by osmosis. That is fantastic. I love that. That's a great expression. I need to remember to say that because I love that. I think with sound spelling relationships, it's not something you should study, but it is an activity that you should do in class. So with a teacher, it's a useful activity to work with sound spelling relationships. And there's different ways of working with it. It's normally just a 10-minute or 15-minute activity that involves taking words and putting them into the correct place on a table. And the table is normally a table of sounds. And you put the words in the correct place on the table. It's quite useful because it does improve pronunciation and spelling. But it's not something that I think you should actively study at home necessarily. If you really want to improve your spelling and your pronunciation, maybe you should. Osmosis is a good way to learn it. We've got finally 5, 6, and 7. Let's have another look here at Daisy's question. I have to depend on the dictionary to pronounce words. Yeah, that's what I was saying, Daisy. I'm saying that this idea of graphemes having generally some agreed way of saying them is how natives can try to say words they've never said before. But this does lead to a lot of mispronunciation, okay? It does lead to a lot of mispronunciation. Like, I'll show you a word that I saw reading a novel a couple of years ago, which is this. That is a word. In the English dictionary, it's there. How do you say that? Well, I had no idea. But I said it's something like pince nez. And I found out that's wrong. That's wrong. Because we actually use the French pronunciation for that word. So we actually say pince nez. A pince nez. Yeah. So the correct pronunciation is pince nez, not pince nez. But I read the whole book And in my head, I was saying pince nez every time I saw that word. And then someone told me it's pince nez, and I was like, what? Oh, no, you didn't. Oh, no, you didn't. But yeah, it's pince nez. By the way, if you're wondering what a pince nez is, I will try and show you now. Just give me 1 second here. Boom. There we go. You see what this gentleman has on his nose? Oh, wait, I'm showing myself. Hello, everybody. How's it going? Why don't we go back to actually seeing stuff? Oh, we are. We are seeing stuff. That's great. Yeah. Dong. So what this fella is using to see with, that's called a pince nez. Pince nez, but it's spelt like that. So obviously it is tricky, Daisy, even for natives. But the best chance you have is learning about this stuff. I'll just move myself out the way so everybody gets to see fully the whole thing. I would pronounce exactly like you did, Rich. Yeah, and probably a lot of natives would if they haven't seen the word. Coup de grace. That one everyone knows. Coup de foudre, maybe not so much. Rendezvous. Rendezvous. The problem is, you don't know, really, if we're going to use the French pronunciation or the English. And it's one of those things that depends on use. So who uses it and when do they use it? Because, for example, cigarette is a French word, but we use English pronunciation, cigarette. We don't say cigarette. Cigarette. Oui, oui. Cigarette, monsieur. We say cigarette, right? So, yeah. Pince nez, everybody. All right, so that was the skill of decoding, which is all about sound, spelling, relationships. So let's move on. Now we're going to have a look at inference or inference. Why don't I do a quick check for the correct word stress of that word?
Inference.
Inference. Yes, that sounds a lot better. Don't know why I kept saying inference. Maybe because the verb is infer. So we're going to have a look at inference. Let's have a look at inference. I'm going to show you a text. I want you to take a look at this text. Take a look at this text. Oh. I'll read it out. Hobbies are personal activities that individuals engage in during their free time, providing an escape from the daily hustle and bustle. People often choose hobbies that resonate with their interests, passions, or curiosities, ranging from gardening to painting to coding and rock climbing. Hobbies can also be a way to cultivate new skills, meet like-minded individuals, and enhance various aspects of one's life, such as physical fitness, mental clarity, and creativity. So, fairly basic text there. Let's talk about inference. Inference. God damn it, Rich. Come on. See how this happens? You get things stuck in your head. So, what things can we know about this text from reading it which are not actually mentioned? So we're looking at this text and we want to know, what can we know from this text? From what this text is saying, what can we know but things that aren't actually mentioned? Give me some ideas. Something that isn't mentioned in the text, but from the text, we can know it. Sorry, Anawat, could you just rephrase that? Because I think you've said something very interesting there, but I don't think you've said it in quite the right way. Healthy advice, okay. The Golden Pawns, nay. I'm sure I've read it, Pavia, but I can't remember it. Hobbies, okay, that's a good one. Hobbies and socializing go hand in hand. Yes, I agree with you, Manuel. I do believe that that is something that we could infer from this text. So that is something, a piece of information we can get from this text, which is not directly mentioned. Anything else? So I'm going to give you a few here. Okay. Daily life is not relaxing. The text doesn't say that, but we can infer that the text says that. Or we can at least infer that the person writing it thinks that. Hobbies are a way to meet new people. Now, oh, it does say that, actually. Hobbies can also be a way to cultivate new skills and meet like-minded people. Yeah, hobbies are social. Hobbies are sometimes social. So it doesn't directly say that, but we can infer it. Daisy says you can kill time by having hobbies. Yes, exactly. That's a good one. Hobbies are beneficial. Hobbies are beneficial. The text doesn't say hobbies are beneficial, but we can infer from the text that hobbies are beneficial. So this is the skill of inference. Inference is reading the text and understanding exactly what the text is saying. Now, when you do advanced reading exams like Cambridge English Proficiency or Cambridge English Advanced or IELTS or what's the American one? TOEFL. Then you will get questions with inference. Some questions, not all of them, just some. And they can be very tricky because you can see something and you infer the wrong thing because you didn't quite look at the nuance in the statement. And you really have to look out for that if you're trying to get a very advanced score on a reading exam. So inference is an important skill to get to grips with. All right, that's enough about inference. Let's move on. We are going to talk about prediction. So prediction is a really cool sub-skill which is very useful for reading, listening, speaking. Prediction is very useful for all those things. So let's talk a bit about prediction. Prediction is literally just trying to imagine what you're going to see or hear or have to say next. That's prediction. Super cool, super useful sub-skill. So let's have a practice. Look at this title. What do you think is mentioned in an article with this title? What do you think is mentioned in an article in this title? And this is you practicing prediction. So, Storm Ciarán. England prepares for disruption. What do you think's happening? What do you think will be mentioned in that article? If you read that article, what would you hear in that article? And if you're joining us for the first time, why don't you take a moment to hit that subscribe button, join the channel, become one of the excellent English learners on Professor Rich. Smash the subscribe button and join our community as well. You can go to bit.ly/englearnchat and the link is down below the video. And while you're at it, why don't you turn on notifications, hit that notification bell and go to all notifications. That way you will be notified by YouTube whenever we do a stream. There's 2 streams a week. They are Wednesdays and Saturdays at about this time. So what I'm looking for here, folks, is kind of a list of things that you'll expect to read about in this article. So not just like a general idea or whatever, but really like a list of things that will be mentioned. So we might know, like, we're probably gonna hear about extreme weather, right? We're gonna hear about disaster preparations. We're going to hear maybe some government warnings. We're going to hear about the areas worst affected. Okay, we're going to hear that's what we expect to see in an article like this. Maybe flooding. Yes, Alexander, it might mention flooding. Might mention flooding. Might mention how to stay safe. Things like that. So that's the kind of thing you would expect when you see an article with that title. If you want to see that article, you can actually just Google it to get the article there. It's from the BBC. I'll post it in the chat if you want to read the actual article. All right. Let's move on. Next. I hate to break it to you, but if you recognize any of these 32 pictures, you are officially old. Let me say this in a Zoomer voice. Hey guys, I hate to break it to you, but if you recognize any of these 32 pictures, you are... I can't do it. I'm sorry, everyone. I apologize for that. I will never do that again. Okay, I hate to break it to you, but if you recognize any of these 32 pictures, you are officially old. What do you think is mentioned in this article? We just got a lot of people laughing here. Marina Nikolaeva. Well done. That's perfect. That's exactly it. Things people used in the past but don't use now. Bingo. Bingo. And Alexander says fax, pager. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay, well done, folks. So if you do want to read that article, you can see it there. It's on BuzzFeed. I don't recommend BuzzFeed. It's a trash website. Okay, next. How racism replaced obscenity as the new taboo. Where would you see that? And what predictions could you make about what would be mentioned in an article like that? Just realised my face was in the way. How racism replaced obscenity as the new taboo. What is obscenity? Obscenity, Alexander, is rude things. So it's often things which are below accepted standards of morality and decency. And it might be a portrayal of sexual things, offensive, sometimes considered disgusting, repugnant, offending against moral principles. So swear words, pornography, things like that. That's obscenity. Swear words, pornography, rude insults, drawings of parts of the human anatomy on educational textbooks. So I have something I'll tell you about this article. What type of article do you think that? Outrage. Yeah, Daisy, definitely. There's going to be some outrage of some description in this, right? It is a provocative headline. So something mentioned in this article is that the F word, do not type it, but you know what it is, the F word, 4-letter F word. Sometimes it's called the Anglo-Saxon word because it comes from Anglo-Saxon English. The F word was actually illegal until 1960s. And in the 1960s, it was made legal. So before that, the F word was illegal. You could not publish something that contained the F word in England. And then in the 1960s, they made it legal. And that was seen as kind of a victory for free speech. But those of you who are paying attention may notice that we now, today, have some words which are illegal again. And I'm not going to say them, and I'm not going to even say a letter in them. But there are some words in the UK that if you say them, you can be arrested and you can be fined. And if you don't pay the fine, you can go to jail. And you will be made to look very bad by the media for saying a word. It doesn't matter how you say it. If you say it, you're in big trouble. No, I can't give you examples, Mina, but I'll link the article so you can have a look at that article if you want. That's an article from the Lotus Eaters, who are a very popular independent news outlet in the UK right now. All right, so well done, everybody. So that was, of course, predictions, using predictions, and we were practicing making predictions. Now, a question here for you is, why bother? Like, why bother making predictions? What's the point? What's the point in making predictions? So let's have a little think about that. Why bother making predictions before you read something? And there are 5 reasons. What do you think? I don't think you save time, Alexander. Actually, I think it takes more time. I'm not sure if it's to decide if you're interested. I mean, I think you can decide if you're interested before predicting anything. Yeah, I don't think it saves time. That's not what I would say is useful about predictions. I actually think it uses more time. I don't think it's about avoiding disappointment. Hello, Akami. Because it gives an approximate idea of what we're going to read or say. You've got it. And that's the first message I've ever seen from you. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've hit that subscribe button. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It gives you an idea of what you're going to say. Here's the reasons I come up with. So it activates prior knowledge, which we know will aid comprehension. If you activate prior knowledge before reading or listening, it will aid comprehension. And that's why if you study English in class and you're about to read a text, the teacher will always give you some sort of communicative activity before you read the text, because we're activating prior knowledge, which aids comprehension. It sets a purpose for reading because you can predict and then you can check your prediction, right? So you make a prediction about the article like, oh, they're going to say this, they're going to say this, they're going to say this. And then you read and check if your predictions are accurate. So it gives you a purpose. It enhances focus and it improves retention. So improves retention means there's more chance of you remembering the article if you predict what you're going to read in the article before you read it. So there's actually quite a lot of good reasons to make predictions. And predicting is a sub-skill which you can also use in listening and speaking. For example, if you know that you're going to have a meeting in English, then you can start predicting the kind of questions you'll get and the responses you need to make. If you need to go to a hardware store and buy a hammer in English, then you can start imagining that conversation and predicting what's going to happen. And by the way, I use that outdated example of a hardware store because I actually did that in Spain when my Spanish was still very rusty. I remember going to a hardware store and trying to buy, I can't remember what I wanted to buy. It wasn't a hammer. It was something really weird. A really weird part of something, but I don't remember. Okay. All right then, folks. So we've got one more thing that I want to really look at. Sorry, I take that back. We've got 2 more things that I really want to look at. We're going to look now at extensive reading. This is something that we talked about a little bit last week. Extensive reading. So extensive reading is more of a behavior than a skill. Behavior means it's kind of something that you do like a habit. So it's like a way of doing something rather than really being a skill. But let's have a look at extensive reading. Like I say, it's something that we talked about. I'd like you to choose the correct option for number 1 and number 2. Take a look at them, have a read, and choose what you think is the correct option. It wasn't a saw, Daisy. Actually, I've never owned a saw. That's really nice, Domenico. I totally agree with that. making predictions is useful to be aware of what you're going to expect from the text, and it helps you visualize it. Yes, and actually visualization is a reading sub-skill that we're going to talk about in part 2 of our reading sub-skill special. This is part 1. If you're here for the first time, smash the subscribe button. So Daisy and Pavia and Marina Nikolaeva all agree 1A and 2B. Let's take a look. Yes, you've got it. So reading as much as possible, and you should choose easy books. That is extensive reading. Easy books as much as possible, because the idea with extensive reading is that you want to establish a fun and sustainable habit. Your aim here is to improve your reading. It's not to give yourself a headache. Okay? You're not trying, let me say this again, you are not trying to give yourself a headache. You're trying to give yourself something fun and easy that you're going to do a lot. That's the idea with extensive reading. Okay. So I'm going to give you a little flow chart here, which is kind of the Prof. Rich guide for how to choose a book when you're doing extensive reading. So let's have a look at that. Just give me 1 second here. It needs a little adjustment. All right, fantastic. All right, so first of all, the question is, you pick up, let's say you go to a bookstore. Go to a bookstore, go to the English section, right? Or if you want, you could go on Amazon, okay, and take a look at the book, have a little look at the first few pages or whatever, or look in the middle. The question is, first question, can you understand 95% of the language? Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be 95% of the words, but definitely 95% of the language, right? So even if you don't understand an individual word, you can kind of understand the phrase. Right, 95%. Right, if the answer is no, then read another book. Okay, next question. The answer is yes. I do understand 95% of the language. So, next, is it a book you feel excited about or interested in reading? If the answer is no, read another book. If the answer is yes, then we read a page from the middle of the book. So just flip to the middle of the book, random page in the middle of the book, dunk, read a page from the middle of the book. And last question, do you like it? No, read another book. Yes, read that book. Okay, so this is the little test here to find a book for extensive reading. Now, there's other versions of this. People talk about the finger test, where you have to read a page, and every time you find a word you don't know, you put a finger down, and if you get to no fingers by the end of the page, then the book's too difficult. Stuff like that. There's all different versions of it, but the point is you want to find a book that's easy and interesting. And when we're saying interesting, I don't only mean the genre and the title and stuff like that, but also turn to the middle of the book, just have a quick read of what's going on in the middle of the book, just to check if you really are going to enjoy that. Great. So moving on, I want to move on to a different skill now. That was talking about extensive reading. I highly recommend it, by the way. It might surprise you, but if you want to improve your reading, then you can do that by reading. It's a really good way to improve your reading. I'm going to say that again. Reading is a really good way to improve your reading. I'm not joking, by the way. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'm completely 100% serious about that. So extensive reading is fantastic. Okay, moving on. Speed reading. So this is a bit of a special one. It's also a sub-skill of reading, but it's kind of a specialist thing because not everyone needs to do speed reading. It's very much a specialist skill, but it can be very useful to learn speed reading. So why don't we talk about it a little bit. What actually is speed reading? So with speed reading, the goal, the objective is you want to maximize words per minute. That's it. So we want to process as many words per minute as possible. This is not skimming, okay? Skimming is different. Skimming is getting a quick idea of a text without really reading it, right? We did some skimming at the start of class, you remember? Just look at a text, 2 seconds, right, what do you know about the text? That is skimming. This is different. Speed reading is different. Speed reading is you want to maximize your WPM, words per minute. So that means that you are not skipping words, but in fact, you should read everything. So you are with speed reading, in a way, you are reading in detail, but it's a bit different to that. So there's a few critical techniques to learn with speed reading. I'm going to break it down for you, and then I will tell you how to practice speed reading. I can do it, and I did practice it quite a lot when I was younger. These days, I don't really do it so much. I use other ways of processing lots of information, but I do think it's a very useful skill if you are studying at university and you have to read a lot. All right? So let's break down exactly what speed reading is. So critical techniques of speed reading. First of all, chunking. So chunking is the idea of, rather than reading word, you read a group of words every time you move your eyes. Okay, and that actually goes on to this one here at the end, optimizing eye movement. So actually I'll put that second because it links to chunking. So chunking is that you group words together. So you don't read word by word, but you read like 3 or 2 words at a time, 2 or 3 words at a time. And you want to optimize your eye movement. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Then another thing you need to do is minimize sub-vocalization. And you might think, Rich, what the hell is sub-vocalization? Well, sub-vocalization is when you're reading, if you have a voice in your head that is reading like out loud in your head. That's sub-vocalization. Most people do this. Most people have a voice in their head when they're reading. And it's sub-vocalization. However, with speed reading, we want to minimize sub-vocalization, because sub-vocalization is actually slower than speed reading. So if you have a voice in your head while you read, then basically your speed reading is slower than it could be. So you need to minimize sub-vocalization. And then finally, you need to utilize peripheral vision. So, of course, optimizing eye movement combines well with utilizing peripheral vision. So let's have a look at this in practice. So if you take a look at this, we have a sentence here. It says, every Sunday I like to watch football, right? Every Sunday I like to watch football. And traditional reading would basically have it so you look, every Sunday I like to watch football. That's traditional word-to-word reading. So you go like bum, 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 right? With speed reading, you don't do that. With speed reading, you have to look in between the words like this. So you look here and you see every Sunday together, and then I like, to watch football. So you kind of jump 2 to 3 words every time. And if you practice this, you can become very good at it and very quick. And I recommend, actually, if you really want to do this, get a pen and get the book that you're reading, and then use your pen as your marker. So you put your pen where your eyes should be, and you go bum, 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 bum. Like that. And you can find other videos about speed reading if you really want to get into it. It is energy intensive. It requires a lot of focus. But if you really need to read a lot of books, it works. So, of course, that is, my book will be a mess. Well, Kat, I don't mean that you write with a pen. I just mean use a pen as like a pointer. Like, bum, bum, bum. Okay? Like that. Not writing with it. All right. Okay, everyone. So that is the end of part 1 of our little reading sub-skills class. Not the end, actually. We still have some things. Don't go yet. Some important things to tell you, including homework. But just to let you know what's coming in part 2. So part 2 will involve reading fluency, contextual vocabulary acquisition, which is something that Alexander mentioned at the start of class. Summarization, visualization, which is something that was mentioned by Domenico Lafauci before. Evaluation, critical reading, which is, in my opinion, one of the most under-taught reading skills in schools today. Meaning from context, phrase farming, which I used to call vocabulary mining, but now I just like phrase farming better, and adjusting reading speed. So these are all the things that I'll be looking at. These are also sub-skills of reading, and I'll be looking at those in part 2. And here is your homework assignment, everybody. So I'll just disappear from this so you can see. This is the homework assignment for today. So, Rich, reading sub-skills from part 1, do you find most beneficial? So if you consider all of the sub-skills from today, then I'd like you to record a 3-minute audio explaining your choice of 2 or more sub-skills from today, elaborating on what they are and how they are important or useful for you. And you should do the things there mentioned at the bottom. If you need to remind yourself what the sub-skills are that we talked about today, then, well, I suggest that you download the lesson notes from today, which are available in a link under the video. At least they will be in just a second. I'm doing like 200 things at once here, so just give me a moment, okay? Right, okay, homework posted on the Discord server. Okay, so where can you download the notes from today, everybody? You can download them from bit.ly/readingsubs. Right there. So you can get the notes from today right now from that link. And we're on to question time. So this lesson was inspired by Miss Pavia, who wanted to ask some questions about reading. But to be honest, I had really good fun today talking about reading sub-skills. I love talking about sub-skills. I think it's useful to talk about sub-skills. I think it's useful to know what the sub-skills are. I think it helps you as a learner, and it helps me as a teacher, and everybody's happy and loves it. So anyway, question time, folks. What questions have you got? Rich, what's the deadline for homework? Yeah, that deadline doesn't make any sense at all, does it? That's total nonsense. Just give me a second here. The 11th. The 11th of the 11th. That's the deadline. So for those of you that don't know, I correct these audios and we listen to them together and we talk about what we like and what we don't like and all the rest of it. And it's really good fun. So you should definitely do the homework and submit it to me, and then we'll talk about it. And if you want to do that, you have to join our Discord server, because that is the only place where you can send me the homework. So go check that out. Dear Rich, should I miss unknown words during reading? Great question. What do you mean by that, Alexander? What do you mean by that? Because that sounds really interesting. So we're definitely gonna talk about that. Your profile picture looks like John Goodman, by the way. Are you John Goodman in disguise? You look like John Goodman in Big Lebowski. See if I can find a picture. Yeah, that's exactly what you look like. There he is. That is John Goodman, isn't it? That is a picture of John Goodman from Big Lebowski. Okay. Oh, Manuel, I know that situation. In fact, that happened in one of our classes. Go and celebrate. Go and celebrate with your daughter. That's fantastic. So... should I miss unknown words during reading? I still don't quite know what you mean. Do you mean if you see an unknown word, should you ignore it? Is this question, should I ignore words that I don't understand? Is that the question? Right. Yes. Okay, so the answer is yes, most of the time. That's the answer. Okay. What you should do, though, is you should try to get a guess of what the word means, but don't stop reading. Just keep reading. Especially if the word comes up again, you can start to get it, right? And the only time that you should put the book, you should like pick up a dictionary or pick up your phone or check or whatever, is when you find you no longer understand the story. So if you get to the point that you no longer understand the story, then you need to stop and you need to look in your phone. But most of the time, just ignore. Just if you don't understand it, if you don't know exactly what a word is, you've never seen it before, have a quick guess, meaning from context, and then carry on. Right? And that can often that is the way of practicing reading. That's what you do when you're reading. That's what I do when I'm reading. By the way, it's what native speakers do, because native speakers do see words they don't understand. That does happen. And it will happen to you in your language as well, if you notice it. Sometimes you don't even notice it. Like as a reading, like reading in your native language, you just go blah 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 blah, reading the story, and then if you actually look, you're like, oh, I don't even know what that word means, but it doesn't matter because I still understand the story, right? This has happened to me loads of times. I remember specifically one word that kept coming up that I didn't understand at all was rapture. Right? This was when I was at university. I was reading Terry Goodkind fantasy novel, and they kept using the word rapture. And I was like, what the hell is that? And it came up so many times, and I kind of guessed that it meant something pleasurable, right? But I was like, okay, I need to understand what this is, because the guy just keeps using it. And it actually means a feeling of really intense pleasure, like just absolute ecstasy, right? That's how it's used today anyway. But back then I had no idea. And I'd read the word maybe 5 or 6 times in the story before I decided, right, I need to know what this means. Yeah. So basically, that's it. You use the same strategy. Yeah, I know that, Alexander. So some modern ebooks provide features to check a word immediately by touching it. That's true. I think it's probably better to just carry on if you can, because that is disruptive to your reading process. So if I were you, I would not necessarily use that feature, particularly every time you see a word you don't know. Only use it if you really have to, because you don't want to interrupt your flow. That's the point, especially with extensive reading. You want to get into this flow, where you're just reading, not interrupted by dictionary checks. Even if the dictionary check is super easy, it's jarring, right? It's like if someone's on guitar, right? Someone's got their guitar and they're like, right? Playing something, and then suddenly it's like, oh, let's just stop. Wait, I need to, what's that chord? Let me look at that. There, right? And then you carry on. No. Forget all that, okay? That's not what we're going to do with extensive reading. Just going to keep going. Okay. Right. Thank you very much for that question. Now, there's one from Anawat here. Let's have a look at that. Boom. So, Anawat says, Rich, if I don't have reading skills, is that reading skills, Anawat? If I don't have reading skills, even in my native language, how can I develop my reading skills in English? That is a really interesting question, Anawat. And it actually raises a number of interesting issues. So, first of all, there's a question here, which is, why do you want to develop your reading skills in English? That's an important question. Why do you want to develop? And we've both misspelled develop there, haven't we? Why do you want to develop your reading skills? No, we haven't misspelled develop. What the hell am I doing? Why do you want to develop your reading skills in English? So let's imagine. Well, it's. I actually want you to answer this, Anawat. Yeah. What is reading skill? Says Kat. So the skill of reading, Kat, is literally the skill to read. So how good are you at reading? Right? Are you good at reading? If so, you have good reading skill. And then we today talked about the sub-skills of reading. So they are skills that are used within reading to do specific things. And we looked at about 8 of them today. For a test, Anawat, right? So you mean like IELTS or something? Okay. If you need to develop your reading in English and your reading in your own language sucks, then you might want to start developing your reading in your own language. I know that sounds really weird, but it's true. So you might want to start seeing if it's possible for you to get into the habit of reading. If you're not a reader, it's tough. And I know because I'm someone who is a reader, but I've dipped in and out of reading. And I've definitely had times when I just can't, I find it so difficult to focus and I'm not into it. And I have to force myself to go on. I'm going to just read for 30 minutes, just going to sit here and read for 30 minutes. And if you do that on a regular basis, you start to enjoy the stories and you get into it, then you become a better reader. So if you really, 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 really need to do this because for IELTS and stuff, then yes, you need to start developing your reading in your own language, because reading itself is a skill independent of English. And what I mean by that is, if you're a really good reader in your own language, like Pavia, for example, is obviously a massive reader, right? She's a big reader. And because of that, of course, she's a good reader in English as well. And I'm sure she's a fantastic reader in the other languages that she speaks, for example. And I think you'll find that one of the big things that improves if you get into reading in your own language, one of the big things that improves is your focus, right? So to begin with, your ability to focus is just way off with reading. Like, you sit down and 2 minutes later, you're like, oh God, I can't do this. You know, it's like you're thinking about other stuff. You're not even focused on the book. You're not enjoying it. But if you get into reading, your focus starts to develop a lot, to the point where you can sit down for like 90 minutes and the time just disappears, right? You just find yourself immersed in the world, but it's something you need to develop. I hope that helps, Anawat. Because I just want to clarify as well, if your answer to this was, I don't know, or because I want to improve my vocabulary, let's say, if your answer to this question was, I want to improve my vocabulary, or I don't know, then I would say, don't bother with reading. If you don't enjoy reading in your own language and you have no special reason to learn reading in English, then don't. Do something else, right? But if you need to do it for a test and you don't like reading in your own language, you don't have any choice. You're going to have to get into reading. And probably you're going to have to accept that your reading score might be a bit lower than people who are really into reading, unfortunately. Right. Bum, 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 bum. Next question. Could you please tell me what the native speakers call their teachers by name, says Asmena. Well, that is a cultural question, Asmena, and it depends on the country, not only the country, but even the culture of the school. So different schools have different cultures, and it changes. The culture in the UK is that in primary school, you use the full Mr/Mrs. and the name, right? Like Mrs. White, Mrs. White, Mrs. White, right? When you get to secondary school or even high school, then, well, secondary schools tends to be sir or miss, right? Sir, miss, miss. And then high school can be sir or miss, or it could be teacher's first name. So that depends on the situation with the high school. And we'll say college for that as well. College is not university in the UK. College is when you're 16 to 18. Or let's say 16 to 19 for some people. Or older. College can be older as well. It depends on the course. So Sir or Miss is secondary. And Mr. Mrs. is primary. Primary and infants. And I guess like nursery as well. But nursery, I don't really remember even knowing my teacher's name in nursery. Yeah, something like that. So you can see that we start off quite formal and we quickly get more informal. And once we're treating our students more like adults, then we normally move on to first name. I assume that's the same in the United States, but I actually don't know. What way of reading is best, sir, says Kat. What do you when you say what way of reading, Kat? I need to know more about what you actually mean. Now, you said something interesting before, where you said like you're good at reading in your own language, but you're not so good at reading in English. So what I would say to you is you need to do extensive reading in English. That's what you need to do, and that'll improve your reading. What way of reading is best? Extensive reading, because it's fun and you do it every day and it's great. It's sustainable, and that's important. Because, hey, if you do something else, you get bored, it's too intensive, and then you drop it, not going to be as good. Dear Rich, how can you interpret my story? After reading a remark in Russian, my Russian became more fluent. Should I try remark in English? Remark? Is that a book? Yeah, Alexander, I totally agree with that, by the way. It's one of the really interesting things about extensive reading is that it has a tertiary effect on your production skills. So I found that when I was studying philosophy, when I went to university, and I would read a lot of philosophy, a lot of extensive reading in philosophy. And then when I came to write an essay, I found that I was writing the same stuff, like the same style as I'd been reading. And that's actually how I became a good writer, is by reading a lot of philosophy. So it is something that happens. It's very useful. Anawat, the key is, so he's talking about, he's a good listener, but when it comes to reading, I struggle to keep up with it. The key is you have to go with your interest, Anawat. What are you really interested in? You need some stuff you're really interested in. It can be stories, or it can be fictional books. Like what really gets you going? Yeah? Do you like sci-fi? Do you like fantasy? Do you like learning about different things? And then what you want to do is find a really accessible, digestible book and have a go. Try that. Rich, you mean that reading depends on someone's personality? Is that the right way of saying it? Let me think. I mean that what I was getting at before, Daisy, because I think you're talking about you're talking about this question here, I think, where I said if I don't read in my own native language, how can I develop reading skills in English? And I answered something like, if you don't have to, then don't do it. The reason why I say that is because there are a lot of students who learn languages and they think that they have to become readers, but they don't have to, actually. You can. But if you're just really not into reading, when I say into, I mean interested in. Is it a hobby of yours? Do you like reading? Right? I like reading. I like it. But do you? Because if you don't, then you should really ask yourself, do I need to read in English? Let me tell you something about this, Daisy. For example, I absolutely do not care about reading in Japanese. I have absolutely no desire to learn how to read kanji in Japanese. Zero. And definitely not write it. No desire to write kanji. But I really like speaking it, and I really enjoy listening to it. So I would quite like to learn speaking and listening in Japanese. And I think that is entirely possible. So the question is, do you really need to learn reading in English, And if you do, okay, then you have to do it. If you have an obligation, like a need, a necessity, then you have to do it. Okay, then we find the best way we can. But if you don't have to, and you don't like it, then don't. right? If you don't have to, but you like it, then you should. Because if you like something, it can be a very useful complementary tool for learning the language. How about a short paragraph of the news? Ashley Chen, I can't think of anything more depressing than reading the news. I would highly recommend against it. Right, let's go to Pavia's question here. Let's have a look at this as I lose my voice. How long have we been going for, folks? Why am I losing my voice? Oh, almost 2 hours. Okay, that explains it. So Pavia says, Rich, mostly you're against intensive reading and prefer extensive reading. Very well when it comes to people who are bibliophiles. Which kind of reading will you suggest? Bibliophiles. Well, you know, the interesting thing about bibliophiles, so by the way, if we break down biblio, then biblio is relating to literature, and phile means lover. So bibliophile is a lover of literature, a lover of books, someone who likes to read. The interesting thing about bibliophiles, Pavia, is that extensive reading is incredibly powerful for them because they're already good at it and they already enjoy it, right? So my recommendation would remain the same. However, I think you want to ask about something beyond a bibliophile. You want to ask about someone who's really into literature, not just a bibliophile, but more than that. Let me try and find the right phrase here. I'm sure there's a word for it. Because a bibliophile is like a bookworm, right? But we mean something more than that. Because I know what you want me to say. And I want to clarify that I will say that in a certain circumstance, what you're talking about. No, I can't find a word for it. Damn. All right, fine. Let's say that you are a student of literature. If you're a big fan of English lit, okay. If you're really into English literature, then of course I recommend extensive reading. Right? But that's an obvious recommendation. I don't need to make that recommendation because it's bloody obvious, isn't it? You know, the vast majority of my students are not that, so they don't need it. But if you are that, yeah, of course, extensive reading is mega important. And by the way, all of the reading that I do in class, all of it is intensive reading. And I do lots of reading in class. It's all intensive, right? Or almost all. So we're always looking at difficult texts in class. In class, I do it a lot, right? The idea of extensive reading is it's an activity for you at home, right? Doing it day after day after day yourself. It's your hobby to improve your reading skills. But in class, yeah, we do loads of intensive reading. And for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, intensive reading is basically looking at a very difficult text or a more difficult text, breaking it down, analyzing it, discussing sentences, checking all of the words, looking at the grammar, looking at the hidden meaning. You know, it's really like getting to grips with like a short section of text and going into depth on it. It's really fun. Like for me, and for Pavia, I think as well. Like intensive reading it's super fun for some people. But for other people, it gives them a headache. Okay, it's not fun. Has to be fun for me. I study philosophy. And if you don't like intensive reading, don't study philosophy. Because philosophers are a right pain in the meow when it comes to intensive reading. Let me show you something. So I don't remember the exact statement, but I do remember reading once in Jean-Paul Sartre book something about approaching it with a disinterested interest. A disinterested interest. I had to think about that for about 25 minutes and even get a dictionary out and all kinds of stuff. And I still didn't really understand it, actually. Still didn't really understand it. It drove me crazy, right? And when you get people who write like that, it's like everything becomes a little puzzle you have to solve and unlock every sentence. By the way, I don't agree with writing like that. I think it's unnecessarily obtuse and to some extent pretentious and ostentatious. Nonetheless, it can be fun to analyze, and everything can be fun to analyze. And intensive reading involves that. Involves diving into difficult things, analyzing it, breaking it down, taking on a real challenge to try and understand what the hell someone's saying. You want to go with some serious intensive reading now? You want to challenge? Just give me a second here. Boom, 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 boom. All right, let's have a go. So, one of the, a lot of people say one of the most difficult philosophers to understand. I'm going to read you an extract from one of his books. He wasn't English. He's a continental philosopher. So, are you ready for this? This will be an intensive reading to the max. Still on the preface, and the preface to the second edition, blah, blah, blah. God, I used to read stuff like this all the time. I used to read stuff like this because I thought it was good for my brain. And it probably was, actually. But goddamn, it's horrible to read. You ready? Introduction. Of the difference between pure and empirical knowledge. This is like intensive listening. I'll paste it in a minute. That all our knowledge begins with experience, there can be no doubt. For how is it possible that the faculty of cognition should be awakened into exercise otherwise than by means of objects which affect our senses, and partly of themselves produce representations, partly rouse our powers of understanding into activity, to compare, to connect, or to separate these, and so to convert the raw material of our sensuous impressions into a knowledge of objects, which is called experience. In respect of time, therefore, no knowledge of ours is antecedent to experience, but begins with it. But, though all our knowledge begins with experience, it by no means follows that all arises out of experience. For on the contrary, it is quite possible that our empirical knowledge is a compound of that which we receive through impressions, and that which the faculty of cognition supplies from itself, sensuous impressions giving merely the occasion, an addition which we cannot distinguish from the original element given by sense. till long practice has made us attentive to and skillful in separating it. It is, therefore, a question which requires close investigation and is not to be answered at first sight. Whether there exists a knowledge altogether independent of experience and even of all sensuous impressions. Knowledge of this kind is called a priori, in contradistinction to empirical knowledge, which has its sources a posteriori, that is, in experience. So, what did you think, folks? You like that? What a cant, we might say. It's Mr. Immanuel Kant. What's happened to my document here? I seem to have pasted Pavia's comment like a million times. How did that happen? Okay, that's absolutely bizarre. All right. Oh, I put it in the header. That's why. Let's get rid of that. Bonk. Right, so that's from Immanuel Kant, Critique of Pure Reason. It is torturous to read. If you want to torture yourself, then enjoy. I don't recommend it. Yeah, he's a bloody German. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. I love the Germans. Don't know why I said that. It's because I hate continental philosophy. I think I like English philosophy. I like David Hume. And I like On Liberty by, what's his name? John Thingamajig. Who wrote On Liberty? Damn it. My brain just won. John Stuart Mill. J.S. Mill. Yes. I like English philosophy. Why do you say bloody? What does it mean? It's just like a friendly swear word, Cat. It's not a serious swear word. It's like when the Americans say damn. Damn. We say bloody. That damn cat. That bloody cat. Yeah, I think I've got a bit of a headache just from reading that section of Kant. I just try to show the disadvantage of intensive reading. Nonetheless, Pavia, I do enjoy it, and I know that some people enjoy it. And if you are someone who enjoys it, of course, do it. Of course, do it. Like, there are loads of benefits to intensive reading, right? It's great for your mind. You improve your vocabulary. You improve your ability to critically read and to reason with the text and engage with the text. And it's really fun to do intensive reading with other people and talk about it and say, what the hell does he mean when he says, for how is it possible that the faculty of cognition should be awakened into existence otherwise than by means of objects which affect our senses? I can have a great conversation about that. By the way, he's talking about rationalism versus empiricism, which is, what is the ultimate truth? Is ultimate truth based on repeated experience, or is ultimate truth based on rationalization? For example, a rational truth is a triangle has three sides, and an empirical truth is all cats have a tail. So rational versus empirical truth. That's what Mr. Kant is talking about. This is a bloody good class. That's perfect, Kat. Well done. People will call you a psycho when you're into intensive reading. Well, Pavia, definitely don't listen to what people say. And if you are into intensive reading and you're really academic, then, hey, you might be a genius and you might go really far and you might do all kinds of interesting things in academia. So who cares what people say? Dear Rich, I was surprised recently I found out that ethnic Germans are still the biggest group in the US. I don't know anything about that, Alexander. I know that after the 50s, lots of United States families stopped putting English on the ethnicity form. Because if they had like a little bit of Irish, then it was like cooler to say that they were Irish. So they might have like 7 ancestors who are English and then 1 that's Irish. And they say, oh, well, my ethnicity is Irish because it's more interesting. And I think that probably applies to Polish, German, Slovakian as well. But actually, there's a hell of a lot of English blood in the United States. They can say what they want. They just don't want to call themselves English. The categorical imperative. Hello, Elena Nisimova's getting into it. You did it perfectly, Kat. Perfect use. Rich, tell me about this one. Danish, Norwegian invaders or the Vikings? Pavio, I give you a really extensive answer to this on the Discord server, and I think it was a really, really good answer, so I'm just going to read that again for you. Right, so we were talking about Viking, Norsemen, and Scandinavia. So Vikings encompass a lot of different groups. They can be from Denmark, Sweden, etc. It depends. There's a time. They are time bound. So there's a time period which is around about the 10th century. So 8th, 9th, 10th century. That's when you get lots of Vikings. Okay, if you go further on, the Vikings start to disappear. Okay, and if you go before that, the Vikings weren't really around. So it's kind of 8th, 9th, 10th century, you get a lot of Vikings. And they're from the countries that today we call Denmark, Sweden, Norway. Back then, they weren't called that. In the 8th and 9th century, there's no such thing as Denmark, Sweden, Norway, right? So they come from that part of the world. And when we think of Viking, we think of raping, pillaging, raiding, going around on a boat. That's what we think of. Generally, the Vikings were the Norse or Norsemen. They believed in Norse mythology, which means they believed in the god Odin and the Titans, like Loki. Right, Loki was a Titan, I believe. Odin was a god. Kind of the good guys are like gods and the bad guys are titans, and they're all going to have a big battle at one point, and the world's going to end, but existence doesn't end because stuff happens after Ragnarok, which is the end of the world. So Norse people used to believe this Norse mythology, and the Norse people were called Vikings when they went out raiding and raping and pillaging. Right, so that's the Vikings. They're basically from Scandinavia. And the ones that had the biggest influence on English culture overall were the Vikings from Daneland, which is now Denmark, right? So the Danes, the Danish, were the ones that influenced English culture so much. And English people are very Danish. We have a lot of Danish blood, especially mixed with the Anglo-Saxons. If you go to the northeast of England, then there's quite a strong Scandinavian influence. So a bit further north than Denmark, you've got more of a kind of a Swedish, Norwegian influence coming in. And you've got those kind of traditional Viking ideas of the sort of ginger hair and the big ginger guys and so on. Very pale skin. And the blonde stuff. The blonde hair also comes... Well, the blonde hair actually comes from the Anglo-Saxons as well. So blonde hair comes from the Anglo-Saxons. I mean, actually, the Angles basically are the Danish as well. So it's quite complicated. The Angles, I believe, were from the south of Daneland, of Denmark, sorry, of that area. And the Danish Vikings were from more the kind of north of Denmark. Denmark's not a great place to grow food. That's why they all kept raiding England, because England is a really good place to grow food. Or it was, before we built loads of cities. If you want to say a great series about this, then you should watch The Last Kingdom. The Last Kingdom. Absolutely fantastic. It's a British show. It's really good. The main guy in it, I do believe, is a Danish actor or Swedish or something. He's super cool. And he's supposed to be a Saxon who was raised by the Danes. looking at it right now, I actually want to watch it now because it's such a good film, such a good series. Check it out. I think you can see it on Netflix. Are Scottish and Irish language similar? So, that's a really interesting question, Alexander. Oh, look at Akami flexing with the Norse knowledge there. Akami says Loki was half Titan and half god, raised by Freya and Kratos. Nice. I'm not an expert, Akami, but I accept your expertise. Thank you very much for that. I love to be educated on these subjects. So, Alexander said, are the Scottish and Irish languages similar? So let's talk a bit about that. So first of all, we need to say, what do you mean by Scottish? Because there's a language called Scots and there's a language called Gaelic, the Scottish version. And when you think of those words like loch, the loch, right? Words in Scots that people know, loch. What does loch mean? Do you know loch? So loch means lake, right? Loch, lake. About is about. Af is off. Aroon is around. Okay, so a lot of people think of Scots when they think of Scottish language, right? But Scots is actually a variant of English. So we should actually call it Scottish Variety English. It uses English grammar. It basically uses English words, right? It's just that some of the words are different. If you hear someone speaking Scots fast, you probably won't understand them. But officially, yeah, these are the words. Loch, about, off, aroon, right? That's Scots. However, if the thing is, Scots isn't that old, right? So the origin of Scots, oh, it is quite old. Really? Is that it? I didn't realise it was that old. Is it that old? I need to check this. Oh no, it's not that old. Yeah. So it was 15th century onwards is Scots. So it's not that old, right? However, Gaelic is mega old, right? Well, not mega old, but about double. Gaelic is like 8th century, and maybe even before that, right? Because the Gaelic was the language of the Celts. And the Celts are the people, the ethnic group. They were not all racially identical, but they shared an ethnic culture. You might see like Gaelic Gaelic or Celtic tattoos, stuff like that. So the Celts were the ones who spoke kind of Gaelic, right? If you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about with a Celtic, a Celtic, whatever, Celtic, who knows what they actually said, a Celtic tattoo, it looks something like that. That's kind of the Celtic style, right? And that's what Gaelic is. That's where Gaelic comes from. It's the language of the Celts. So that's actually the ancient Scottish. That's Gaelic is nothing like English. It's nothing like English, right? It's not Germanic. Like English is a Germanic language, but Gaelic or Celtic is not. And the interesting thing with Gaelic is you actually have Gaelic Irish. And they're a bit different, right? They're a bit different. More different than American and British English. More different than that, right? They're more like the difference between Portuguese and Italian, right? Gaelic Scottish and Gaelic Irish. Okay, now for some reason the Scots prefer this language to be like their national language. They prefer the idea of Scots as their national language rather than Gaelic. So when people talk about the Scottish language, they probably mean Scots. And Scots is just English with some different words, okay, and different pronunciation. Whereas the Irish, if the Irish talk about the Irish language, then they tend to mean Gaelic, Irish Gaelic. You've also got Welsh Gaelic, by the way. So that's that. Rob Stark is from Yorkshire, Daisy. And all of the Starks are from Yorkshire, more or less. So it's a northeast English accent, not Scottish. Yorkshire. Go down to the pub. Down to the pub, lad. Down to the pub. That's right good down to the pub. In Sheffield. In Sheffield with a pie. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm not in an accent mood. Yeah, it's the Yorkshire accent, that. Yeah, I type fast, cat. Pavia says, Rich, do the Balto-Slavonic, primitive Germanic and Celtic languages share something in common? If possible, can you explain P Celtic and Q Celtic? Right, that's beyond me. I don't know where you got all that from, Pavia, but yeah, I don't have that level of expertise. What's the difference between Northern Irish and Irish, says Ashley Chen. That's a complicated question, Ashley. The traditional difference is religion. So the Irish are traditionally Catholic Christians, right? Although these days there's it's a very secular country, but traditionally they're Catholic, whereas the Northern Irish are about 50% Protestant and 50% Catholic. And in general, the Protestants want to remain as part of the United Kingdom, but the Catholics want to unite with Ireland. So that's the general kind of principal historic difference between the Northern Irish and the Irish. It's a very complicated political issue. And I would say a key thing for foreigners to know about the Northern Ireland issue is it's not the English who want Northern Ireland to necessarily remain part of the United Kingdom. It is the Northern Irish who want that. So the majority of people in Northern Ireland want to remain part of the United Kingdom. It's what they want. I think if the English politicians could cut Northern Ireland, they would, because it's caused lots of problems for them for many years. But you can't just say, oh, we don't want you guys to be part of the country anymore. That doesn't work, right? By the way, Northern Irish people are lovely, and my family is from Ireland, so I can talk about this issue a bit with some personal interest, okay? And some of my best friends are from Northern Ireland, actually. But yeah, the big point here is that the majority of people in Northern Ireland want to be part of the United Kingdom, not part of Ireland. And there's a lot of animosity over the border. There's friendship and there's also competition. So it's a very complex issue. Yeah, good to see you, Domenico. And Pavia wants me to pronounce Renaissance. That's the exact correct pronunciation. Renaissance. The Renaissance. Renaissance. Nothing can beat the Geordie accent. Is it English? Yes, it's English. It's 100% English, the Geordie accent. It's just a funny accent, but it's 100% English. So thank you very much for joining me today, everybody. If you have enjoyed yourself today, it's a great time to smash that like button right now. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, if you haven't smashed that like button, do smash it right now. Have a lovely rest of your week, and I'll look forward to seeing you all on Saturday. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.